There are several reasons Shakespeare routinely cautions against a Theseus-like confidence in rational knowing. First one, I suppose, is that he is an artist. He's a man of the theater, and he believes in the ability of the theater to communicate a life experience that other forms of inquiry, of course not as well developed in his lifetime, just can't grasp. For those of you, and I think there's a small number of traditional English majors, you'll probably get a sense of this, which is that the good novel, the good poem, the well-done philosophical treatise explains as much about the world as any sort of scientific theory, at least to some. Another reason, however, that Shakespeare expresses this skepticism towards Theseus is it very much matches a Reformation view of what Paul interpreted about the resurrection, which was quite simply the resurrection is a mystery. It can't be explained. Christian history has evolved over the years trying to explain the birth and the death and the resurrection of Christ in what Paul would consider a very Greek way. In Galatians, he says, "Be neither Jew nor Greek," and by that he means don't be too Greek and try to explain everything rationally, nor be a Jew and explain everything prophetically. The coming of Christ and the birth and the death and the resurrection are something completely new, and to sort of be honored and respected as a mystery that one doesn't explain, despite our natural tendency to try to explain, to try to dominate, to try to control or understand things. Um, Shakespeare gets at the Pauline part of this in the scene immediately before the Theseus and Hippolyta exchange. And this is where Bottom wakes up, having had his head transformed back into a normal head. And Bottom wakes up, this is Act 4, Scene 2, lines 201. He's shocked and surprised. He wakes back up at that very moment when he was turned into an ass. He says, "When my cue comes, call me, and I will answer. My next is most fair Paramus. Hey ho, Peter Quint's flute, the bellows mender snout, the tinker starveling, God's my life stolen hence, and let me sleep. I have had a most rare vision. I have had a dream, past the wit of man to say what dream it was." And then Bottom goes on to try to do what most of us do with dreams, which is to try to explain them or try to rationalize them. "Man is but an ass if he go about to expound this dream. Methought I was," there is no man can tell what. "Methought I was, and methought I had, but man is but a patched fool if he will offer to say what methought I had." In Shakespeare here in this prose speech, this is not in blank verse, this is in prose, has Bottom interrupt himself, stop himself, much in the way that we're familiar with modern stream of consciousness in the novel. And by the way, Shakespeare was a master at this. The early modern drama didn't give characters what we would call realistic dialogue like this. Shakespeare invented interrupted speech. He invented this kind of naturalism, very different from his contemporaries, say like Christopher Marlowe or Ben Jonson. But note again, the important thing here is not so much the style, but what Bottom is doing intellectually. Bottom is stopping or interrupting or controlling his own impulse to explain the dream, and he simply, to use a colloquialism from the Beatles, he is simply letting the dream be, right? He is not trying to exert a kind of violent, rational control over it. He is holding himself back. He says, and in doing that, he says, he quotes Paul, or he garbles Paul a little bit. "The eye of man hath not heard, the ear of man hath not seen, man's hand is not able to taste, his tongue to conceive, nor his heart to report what my dream was." And that's a bastardization of Corinthians 2, where Paul, goes back to Leviticus and finds, from the ancient Hebrew text, a similar caution, a similar willingness simply to experience the divine as a mystery, to don't try to rationalize it, don't try to understand what it is, simply let it wash over you. And he says, "I will do this. I will get Peter Quince to write a ballad of this dream. It shall be called Bottom's Dream because it has no bottom. It has no me in it, literally, and it has no foundation, no ground where I can set my feet and understand something. I will call this Bottom's Dream, and I will sing it in the latter end of the play before the Duke. Peradventure, to make it the more gracious, I shall sing it at her death." this is a funny speech, like all of Bottom's speeches, but it's also quite poignant because it really gets to the heart of Paul's Christian message, a message which has been lost as Christianity has evolved over the last 2,000 years or so, which is, um, again, the birth and the death and the resurrection aren't to be taken in. They are to be rather a matter of awe, or as Paul says in Philippians, work out your salvation in fear and trembling. Work out your salvation in fear and trembling. In other words, if you truly believe or have faith in the mystery of Christ, you won't accept that that is something that has happened to you that has made everything perfect. Rather, you will accept it as a mystery that you can't completely understand, but you will work towards in fear and trembling, simply not knowing, or not knowing in the way we generally think we know things.